This session will explore how we must work to educate the general public on CCS because the public have both the ability to drive CCS implementation and halt it. We also know that public perceptions differ across continents, and so we have a panel today that covers many different areas of the world. And I'd like to say that we would like to have time to take questions. I have some questions, but I'd like to open the floor. There will be 2 mics, but we will only open the floor after each of the individuals on the panel presents. So I'm going to ask that when we do take questions that you identify who you are and your organization, and then to proceed to ask a question to either the panel as a whole or to a specific panelist. So I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel on this topic of public acceptance. We have, to my far right, Dr. Wolfgang Roland, Head of Business Communications at Vattenfall, Tim Bertels, Head of CCS Shell Global, my far left, Leon Still, Business Developer TNO, and to my immediate left, Michiaki Harada, Director J-Coal. So I'm going to ask Wolfgang if you could please come up and kick off this session. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for the invitation to have the chance to give a presentation here on acceptance. It is really great to be here, to have this good spirit of a realizing project. That's what we are all waited for. We are here to share some of the knowledge of Boundary Dam and have the opening. And I think that's a great success story for SaskPower. My congratulations. But it's also a strong signal for CCS. And to start, I'm talking about acceptance. And I think that's one of the things about acceptance is that we all should take this success here with us home and talk about it. That will really help the acceptance of CCS all over the world. Some years ago, I would not have thought that I would have to travel that far to have such an opening ceremony. We had very promising projects in Europe that looked quite good from the technical point of view. The business was a bit unclear, I would say, in the beginning, but they look very, very promising. You all know how this development went. I don't have to elaborate on that. But in Europe, we were not comparably successful as you are here now. And part of the story, and I say only part of the story, has to do with acceptance. To make it very clear from my point of view, it is not primarily acceptance that stopped or at least delayed this project. There are many other reasons, the economical situation, I would say. But acceptance is part of that story. And it is quite important if we want to develop CCS in future that we are aware of the acceptance issues around that. I only have a few minutes, so I don't want to give a comprehensive view about this, but just to give some small input to the discussion, mainly based on our projects we have here. Just the basis why I'm talking about it, we have a strong lignite basis excavating 60 million tons of lignite a year, which means 60 million tons of CO2 emissions, and that's a big risk for our business. That's why we went for CCS quite early, and like other greenfield projects, we had a roadmap developed that on the capture side that we had to stop, as you can see here by the red cross. At the demo scale, we developed the pilot plant, but the demos had to be stopped. And we had the same on the capture part, where we had to stop one step earlier on the pilot scale. And also part of this has to do with acceptance. What are the acceptance issues? I think there are 2 main overwhelming topics. The first one is CCS reasonable climate change mitigation technology? There are a lot of subtopics below this. Do we need coal? This is especially in Germany a big issue. Storage capacities, end of the pipe technology, are renewables a better alternative? You all know these things. So the general question, and the other one is, how risky is storage and maybe transport, especially under my backyard? these are the local issues, leakage, freshwater pollution, and all these other things. And what you see is that you have even if you come to a positive evaluation that CCS is a valuable technology to mitigate climate change, you have a conflict between the abstract global benefit and the real or felt real local risk population sees. And that's a conflict that's really difficult to solve in a project itself. And you have other topics that are not that much seen, but they have a big role in acceptance, I would say. First of all is time. It was, I think, already mentioned by John, that we are a bit, or it takes quite a lot of time. There was a lot of pressure on all the projects due to funding mechanisms and so on to develop them very, very fast. That was too much pressure, I think, for the project developers and the society at that point. But it's also vice versa. If you have opposition groups, they are looking on your schedule very much. So they need success, like the project needs success. And if you want to go into opposition to a project, it's the best to work on the agenda, on the program, and try to delay it. That's intermediate success for opposers. That strengthens them. That's a very strong thing. And if you are able to get a project to a halt, you have really have a good chance to stop it finally. It's the same thing with the legal situation. Legal framework is a mirror, more or less, of societal interest, but a weak legal framework also goes back to the opposers. They see that the state is not willing to really support, and that strengthens opposition against projects. And you can also talk about technology. You need hands-on technology, show technology. That's why Boundary Dam is so important to convince people. Just a short figure, maybe to step back, what we are really talking about. And we are always talking about acceptance, but it's that what we really want or go for. On this graph, you see on the horizontal axis the action, active, passive, and on the vertical one, the attitude of groups, whether they are negative and positive. What you always wish to have active action that is positively different, that is support for a project. That's what you want from politics. And what you don't want is a negative attitude and an active action to it, that's the protest. And then there's something in between, that's the toleration of a project and the acceptance of a project. And these are two completely different things, and we often mix them up. We want the public to tolerate a project, we're going for acceptance. And that's methodological, a different thing, whether you try to convince people or whether you just might compensate people so that they tolerate something. And you always have to look where your stakeholder groups are at the moment in the beginning of the project and where they might develop in the course of the project. So it's very important to have this graph in your back and be clear in your definitions and your targets concerning each stakeholder group in there. What we know about mechanisms in society, we have social sciences doing a lot of empirical work. I don't want to state on this. That's more for policy, I would say, for teaching the general public. On the project level, it is much more interesting what psychology says about perception. People very early recognize, evaluate what is my burden, my risk, what's in for me in the project. That happens within minutes, sometimes even seconds. Then people are reinforced by their first judgment. They select news, what fits in their world. You have group dynamics process. That's really a mechanistic thing that goes on, and project developers should know what's happening there. The main lesson we learned, I would say, is there are many reasons why large infrastructure projects may fail, are delayed, or become more costly. And companies often see themselves as victims of these processes. That is valid and true in many cases, but it doesn't help any further. Nobody forced you to do the project. So what has happened is just that some of the risks you should have known have realized. And so you have a misjudgment of your risk, in fact. You need to know more knowledge about societal process, what is going political process, and that is one conclusion we draw, that like other companies, we spend a lot of money in the early phases of project for environmental expertises, technical expertises, feasibility studies, but not much money on evaluating the social background of this. So what we are now doing is doing potential conflict analysis, systematic potential conflict analysis of project in our societal surroundings. That makes you aware of the things, that it just it creates more awareness. It helps you to have a systematic approach dealing with these issues, and to have it all along the project. You can check whether you are in line and things are going as you expected. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Roland. I'd like to ask Mr. Bertels to come up and present.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all say thank you to the organizers of this conference for inviting me today. I think it is a great day. We are celebrating a huge milestone, one for SaskPower, one for Saskatchewan, one for Canada, and one for CCS demonstration in the world. It is truly important that we demonstrate CCS, and I will come back to that in a minute when I talk about societal acceptance, societal support, I should say, for CCS. About a year ago, I think at this forum, or a previous forum that we had a little bit over a year ago, I spoke about a tipping point. And I think that I really hope that this might be the tipping point in moving CCS forward and in demonstrating that CCS is here, it's real, and indeed the future is here today. So what I would like to do over the coming 10 minutes is to share with you the insights that Shell has gained from societal support, from the projects that we have been undertaking over the past years, those that failed and those that are going well at the moment as we speak. If I can make this work. Yeah. So first of all, I have to show you our usual disclaimer, which I ask you to read very, very, very quickly, and then I can just keep going.
There'll be something to sign in the lobby afterwards.
Indeed. So let us explore for a minute what characterizes early mover CCS projects. And here you see the few that Shell is involved in, proudly involved in terms of Boundary Dam, Quest, TCM, Peterhead, and Gorgon at the bottom right of the map. But of course, this holds for many other projects that we will hear about and that we have heard about. First of all, I would say that the public is largely unfamiliar with CCS. That is not new, it has been said before. And this is really important for when you go with new projects into a community. Second, at this moment, projects require still public funding. Most of them do, at least, to some extent. And thirdly, demonstrators at this stage are still relatively high cost. So that feeds, of course, the notion that CCS would not be cost competitive, which we don't think is true, and we hope will be demonstrated over the coming years. But at this moment, of course, in the early stages of getting the cost down through learning, the costs are still relatively high. And hopefully, when Mike Monea is going to be right, then indeed we will soon see that projects, the next follow-up projects, will go down in cost very rapidly. And then finally, perceived limited local benefits. You might talk about climate change mitigation and long-term benefits, but for the people next to whom you're going to do a CCS demonstration project, there's very little local immediate direct benefit for them. And we can come back a little bit to that, how we can mitigate that. Let me talk a little bit about what societal support for CCS requires. And first of all, I would think that obviously perhaps, but it does require some kind of notion of support to act on climate change. These pictures have been taken in New York a couple of weeks ago, 1.5 weeks ago actually, in the weekend on the march. And this is just the beginning of what is obviously needed, but not only for green energy, but also for clean fossil energy. And so there needs to be clarity on the need for CCS, clarity on the safety of CCS, and the costs and benefits of CCS. So people need to know what options are available to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and what is the role of CCS therein. And is the CO2 capture, transport and storage close to my home sufficiently safe? How can we demonstrate that? And what will it cost in comparison to other options, and what will the benefits be for me? And so this is not only the people living close to the projects, but obviously also the politicians, the regulators in general, and of course NGOs, academia, etc. So it is society at large. It's not only going to be the public close to the projects. So let's have a quick look at one of the projects that didn't make it through the finish line. That's most of you will have heard about, the Barendrecht project in the Netherlands. I'm just bringing it up again here because we have learned from that project in how we deal with societal outreach in the Quest project and the Peterhead project and any other project they were involved in. So what was missing here is that there wasn't a buy-in to the case for CCS. There was kind of a solution provided before people actually got the notion that there was a problem. And so we came with a project in a void of the need for anything, and that was one of the clear failures in this case. Obviously, there were safety concerns on CCS. As you can see here, that this encircled space is actually close to a town of Barendrecht, even though this was going to be stored deep underground, obviously. There were concerns about safety, and the messaging around that was confusing from different stakeholders, governments, academia, companies. There was confusing messaging to the people, and that certainly didn't help bringing comfort to those who were living around this. And then finally, again, there were no immediate benefits for the community who had already been impacted by several infrastructural projects that were sort of done to them in terms of government projects on high-speed rail, big motorways, etc., etc. And now they had a chance, of course, to stand up and say, not another one, please. And so that's basically what happened in Barendrecht. Of course, it's a far more complicated story, but certainly we took some learnings from this project. And so with Quest, which is the project in close by, relatively close by in Alberta, of course, which is a full value chain project taking CO2 from the Scotford upgrader and then transporting it on land and storing it onshore, which does make a difference. We started engagement well in the early days with the first public project disclosure in October 28. We had a large stakeholder consultation program, which is still ongoing, as you can imagine, because Quest hasn't delivered yet. Landowners, municipal districts, local authorities, industry stakeholders, and provincial and federal regulators. So basically all these stakeholders you can think about. And again, not only the people who live close to the pipeline, about 80 kilometers to the north, and the wells where the CO2 is going to be stored, but obviously the whole community and also the regulators, because quite a bit of the funding is going to be from the public. So it's clear that, of course, you need to engage the public on this. We had many open houses, we had a Quest cafes, we had county and town council updates. You see some pictures from that. And we have a community advisory panel meetings, monthly meetings, and also sort of to bring together a representation of those stakeholders and a community advisory panel that we have a sounding board to engage with. So that proves to be very valuable in how we progress CCS in Alberta. Edmonton and north of it, and so far so good. We are progressing quite well with Quest. You see some pictures of the Quest elevator that we use and the visits that we take people to the wells. In Peterhead, which is quite a different project, is in the UK, gas-fired power station. The storage is immediately offshore. So from the capture plant, we go almost immediately offshore. We store in a depleted gas field. That helps in the sense that there's more limited community engagement necessary from the perspective of people living close to the operations. But of course, we do communicate very well with the local community around the gas-fired power plant from which we are going to capture CO2, one turbine that is. And so we have been sharing the details of the project with local communities and sought feedback in very early stages again, well before we started the feed earlier this year. We have had many people at different venues. As you can see, we also engaging school children in terms of education programs. So far, we have had very positive feedback and support of project, and we are doing detailed analysis also of the feedback that is ongoing to shape the phase 2 of the consultation. So this will continue as we speak through feed and through taking FID. Last slide, what will it take to go forward? I think we really need to have a very collaborative effort going forward on community engagement in general on CCS and community engagement in particular around projects, which of course is normally done by the project owner. But there is a higher level collaborative effort required on education, on collaboration, obviously on demonstration, and that's why these projects are so key, and on communication around what CCS is, what it isn't, how safe it is, and how cost-effective it is, etc. I would call upon all of us actually to collaborate even more than we do already, to make sure that we get the right message across to the right people at the right time, and that we actually build those demonstrators to show that this is here and can be done. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Still, and after Mr. Still will be Mr. Harada.
Luckily, I didn't wear my high heels today, so that's good. Well, thank you very much for having me here as well. I'm very happy to be here in this momentous occasion that finally the first real capture demonstration plant is opening and it's actually producing CO2. I will be telling something about what we did in the Cato 2 program, which is sort of the Dutch national CCS program. Firstly, a little bit a fast introduction of TNO. TNO is a Dutch research and technology development organization, an institute. We've been founded in 1932 by law, actually. Back then there was also a big crisis going on, and the Dutch government viewed the innovation or the way ahead that should be through innovation and technology development, and that's why TNO came to be. We have at the moment about 3,300 employees, a revenue of 600 million euros, of which 1/3 is direct government funding. We do actually work on a lot of markets. The CCS part is in the energy market, but we're also looking into building environment, defense, safety, construction, healthy living. And so if you want to blow something up in a controlled manner, or you want to block a radar in Europe, then you have to go to TNO, because we sometimes do that. Just also a little introduction, like how we actually work, because we're bound by law to certain restrictions on technology development and also commercialization. We need to always partner up. So we can do consultancy, but we have to partner up with companies or other institutes on programs or business to business. And once, for example, it's a technology has been taken to the pilot stage, we basically have to let it go, because other companies can make more money out of it when the commercialization phase is there, and we are not allowed to do that. For carbon capture, transport and storage, we've been working on this for, I think, almost 30 years. That's our different groups within TNO working on it, on the actual CO2 capture program, of the capturing of the CO2, the transportation, what happens to multi-phase flows, that kind of thing, and also about injecting it in reservoirs and how it goes in the reservoir itself. Here are a few of our example projects. The one above is actually the Cato 2 project. That's basically the Dutch national CCS program. It's been going on for a long time. It's almost at the closing stages at the moment. And TNO was the program management of that, and we also had a big part in the project. For the public acceptance, actually, when I was making this presentation and having the invitation from SaskPower to be here, I was thinking, okay, how am I going to approach this? And I just asked around people that I know in my environment, like, what kind of questions do you have about CCS? Well, shockingly, because I've been working in this field now within TNO for 3 years, most of my friends actually said, what is CCS? What the hell is it? So they haven't really been listening, unfortunately. But if you look at these questions, some of them are, you might say, very uneducated, maybe even a little bit stupid, but they need to be addressed. You need to be able to say, look, we need this kind of CCS, we need to be able to capture the CO2, to use the coal in the future, of all the reasons that all the other delegates also mentioned this morning. So in that sense, you need to communicate in a correct way and educate in a correct way to be able to have these projects going and not stopped, like Tim said, for example, with the Barendrecht case. So this is a little bit about the Cato 2 project, and in that Cato 2 project there's also work package 5, which specifically goes on public perception. Like, well, and then it really is aiming at the communication part of it. Most of the Cato 2 program is actually looking more towards technology development, but also on transport and injection, so all the other parts of the CCS chain, but public perception is in there as well. If you then look at the most important findings, You have to understand that because it is the Dutch national CCS program, and in essence also Europe, the situation is completely different from over here. We have much more people living in a constricted area than you have here in Canada. I mean, the famous joke around here is that you can watch your dog run away for 3 days, I think, because you can look very far, nobody is here. We don't have that luxury in the Netherlands. If your dog runs away and it exits your backyard, then it's gone. So you can't find it anymore. So actually what you have to do is, if you look into the communication aspects of it, Tim already also said something about the, for example, that people don't have benefits, real direct benefits of CCS or storage field near their home. But it's also like how you're going to communicate it. So people trust, for example, NGOs, environmental NGOs, much more than they trust the big bad industry partners. So you need to have a mix of different stakeholders, NGOs, research institutes, and the industry itself, actually giving the information to people to make sure that everybody understands and that there are different opinions there. Also persuasive communication, so just bombarding people with all kinds of information about how safe it is, how great it is, that there's absolutely no way the CO2 will sprout out of the air, out of the ground, is probably very counterproductive, especially if it comes from one party only. These mistakes have been made in the past, so you just have to make sure that it doesn't happen. Also, on the scientific level, that's something that also TNO had to learn, specifically from Barendrecht, is that you can put an expert who knows everything about CO2 injection and everything about reservoir engineering in front of the place where I'm standing right now and explaining to them why it's very safe. But he needs to be able to say that to uneducated people about this specific topic. So it's nothing to do with intelligence, it only has to do with knowledge. So you need people that can actually do that. So people need to process information, communication strategies have to go in such a way that doesn't damage all the other stakeholders, you need to respect them. I think these are the most important findings from the Cato program. And then I would almost say the most important one is have a good mix of different stakeholders that communicate these things to people. One other thing about the CCS, what the Cato 2 also produced is this argument map. It's very small, you probably cannot really read it, but it's printable in A3 format. And we have sort of handed out to people in Rotterdam for the road project. And it basically summarizes why you want to do this and why CCS is a good idea, what is the environmental effects of it, what's the safety aspect, how does it relate to the energy mix or the energy demand that we need in the future. All these aspects are taken into this map and shown to people around. So it's a bit of a summarization almost of an 8-year program. And that's what I would like to say about that.
Great, thank you. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Harada to come up and to share his thoughts.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michiaki Harada from JCOR, Japan Coal Energy Center. It's my great pleasure to make a presentation today. And I'd like to say congratulations for Boundary Dam 3 CCS project arrived at operation. Before my presentation, I'd like to introduce JCOR. JCOR was established as a foundation in 1990. It covers all coal-related issues from upstream to downstream, promoting as one-stop shop for coal. We have many member companies, over 100. This shows the contents of my presentation. Energy outlook in Asian region. And next, energy efficiency and CO2 emission reduction. Next, Tomakomai CCS project and CCS public acceptance in Japan. And next, status of CCS public acceptance in Asian region. There is no royal road to CCS public acceptance. And lastly, conclusion. This figure shows the primary energy demand in 2035 in the IEA new policy scenario. As you can see here, China and India is a big demand in 2035. And this figure shows the outlook of coal demand and electricity generation in Asia. Coal demand is very big in China and India and any other Asian countries. And also, you can show electricity generation by source. You can see coal is a very big source in non-OECD. Non-OECD means India, China, and any other Asian countries. And this figure shows a high efficient technology reduce CO2 emissions. You can see this figure. Japan is the best efficiency in the world. And you can see right-hand figure shows the operation and maintenance keeps excellent operation in Japan. So technologies for coal-fired power plant include operation and maintenance method should be introduced to developing countries. As a result, CO2 emission will be reduced. And this figure shows estimating CO2 emission reductions. When applying the most advanced coal-fired power plant in Japan to US, China, and India, the CO2 reduction effect is estimated to be 1.5 billion tons. 1 billion tons per year tons is equivalence of CO2 emission, annual CO2 emission in Japan. So Japanese government is promoting bilateral offset credit mechanism. Spreading of high efficient technology to developing countries, it is contribute to reduce CO2 emission in the world. So in Asian region, importance is firstly to introduce high efficient technologies. After then, CCS will be introduced. Next, I'd like to show you the challenges of public acceptance in Japan. This shows Tomakomai CCS project in Japan. You can see left side figure, Japan Island and Tokyo, and Tomakomai is north of Japan. And this project is carried out by Japan CCS Corporation Limited, which is entrusted by Japanese government. CO2 is captured from oil refinery and transport by pipeline and injecting in these wells. You can see a red line, 2 wells in here. This figure shows many activities of public acceptance in Tomakomai CCS project. You can see many photographs. There are many activities in 2011 to 2013 before construction of Tomakomai project. Panel exhibition 67 times, lecture meeting some 30 times, CCS forum and site visit 3 times, kids science rooms 10 times, any others. And this figure shows the status of CCS public acceptance in Asian region. In Japan, I mentioned before, many events in Tomakomai project. Many of public attended CCS public activities in Tomakomai have approved CCS, but an awareness of CCS in Japan is low. On the other hand, China, Korea, and Taiwan, many R&D for CCS have been conducting in these countries. There are some pilot scale projects in China and Korea, but an awareness of CCS in these countries is very low. So I think there is no royal road to CCS public acceptance. We go to accomplish of CCS to acceptance step by step. To be a commonplace for developing country in Asia to own high efficient coal-fired power generation by introducing Japan's high efficient technologies. To conduct large demonstration CCS project like Boundary Dam 3, one more in the world. To repeat and extend public outreaches, for example, exhibition, lectures, forum, and so on. And to be schooling in high school and university in the world. And then future is here, to future is there. And there is a 3 principles of acceptance of CCS for public, I think. First one is safety. Second one is environmentality. And third one is economy. These are very important issues for CCS acceptance. Lastly, conclusion. I mentioned before these items. Lastly, future is here, to future is there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Harada, for your comments. So if anyone has any questions, please go up to the microphone to ask any of the panelists. I'm going to ask the panelists to remain seated if there are any questions. I am respectful of time. I do have one question. Maybe we'll start, and I'll just throw it to the panel at large. Let's assume that we were playing a game of fantasy public acceptance for carbon capture. Are you guys okay? You getting worried yet? In what ways can the Boundary Dam 3 story be leveraged to improve public acceptance in other countries? Roland, do you want to give it a shot? Dr. Roland?
I can try.
If you could just press your button, and then if anyone has a question, please go up to the microphone.
Okay. As I already said in my presentation, it is very difficult to convince people if you don't have any showcase, whether it is on the capture side or whether it is on the storage side. And that's what we argued for many, many years now in Europe, that we need a demonstration project in Europe. We said we need 6 or 12 at some time, but in the end we said, let's have one that's really urgent to show people, to show politicians. It works, it is safe, it is even economical. And that's what Boundary Dam is standing for. It's a bit remote, unfortunately, from Europe, but I would say we have to bring the people here, so many politicians, journalists, whatever. You should take a fee, and it should become a significant part of your business model, finally, from that fee. That's what we should do.
Thank you. Any other comments? Leon?
I would
I mean, I think the main thing, actually, I agree with Wolfgang about the significance of such a demonstration. But the main thing also, I would say, is that you just show over time that there are no cows dying because CO2 is coming out of the ground or something like that. Because that's the main thing that people need to be aware of. You know, in the case of, for example, the Barendrecht, people were a bit frightened about the CO2 being in that field. It might come up in the backyard or whatever. But if you think about it, there was methane in there before. So that was high explosive stuff, but nobody cared. And so you need to be able to show people, look, it's safe, it works. And we can do that also by taking the boundary dam example.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, so indeed, as for previous speakers, my answer would be in many, many ways. And this is about the regulations that have been put in place to make this happen that were discussed. Those can be exported, if you like, or at least used as a great case. It is about the fact that this can be done in a safe manner. It's about the fact that the technology is actually working and can be put together. It's about the fact that, or at least the expectation that the costs can already come down, perhaps in the next demonstration. So yeah, it's about bringing people here. It's about making movies about what's happening here. It's about seeing is believing. And so this is a hugely important project, just like any other big-scale demonstration project is.
Great. Just one last question for Mr. Harada, because we've heard about the project in Canada, here in Saskatchewan, what's going on in Europe. I wonder if, what would you say are the greatest challenges for CCS public acceptance in Asia?
It's a very difficult to expand to Asia, CCS public acceptance, because many Asian countries is developing countries. So I think it's a very difficult to conduct CCS. But Japanese government would like to progress CCS to expand in Asian area. So Japanese support is very important for Asian countries. I think we think some method to extend CCS in Asian countries. After then, we can conduct CCS project and also accept for public in Asian countries.
Great, thank you very much. Okay.